Story 1. I don't think many people could even manage 2 days. Maybe they could stretch to 3 days with energy drinks, but I believe that would be the limit for many individuals. Story 2. A day consists of 24 hours. I could likely do 2 and walk away with 20,000. I might be able to manage 3, but I'm not willing to risk my health. Story 3. $10,000 is a small amount considering the downsides. Anything after 3 days of wakefulness can cause permanent damage to the brain. That being said, I would stay up for 48 hours to collect my $20,000. Story 4. I will take 24 hours and walk away. The most I did was 36 hours and I was seeing double by then, so it is definitely not worth it. Story 5. I will do 24 hours for $10,000. There won't be much preparation needed. I will start on Friday and continue into Saturday. I will go to work on Friday, come home, have dinner, drink an energy drink, and play video games until 6 a.m. That will complete the 24 hours. Story 6. I've worked over 60 hours at one time due to a combination of a new infant, graduate school papers, and an audit I needed to prepare for at work. This was complicated by a new Adderall prescription to see if the extended release would help me stay focused during long days. Instead, it made it nearly impossible to sleep for 2 straight nights before I stopped taking them. The result? I completed all my work and then spent an entire night playing Call of Duty, getting disturbed by shadowy figures on the couch with me that took too long to realize were actually hallucinations. On the 3rd day, I went to work in class and somehow came home, lay on the floor by the front door, and fell asleep. My wife found me snoring when she came home with the kids later and made me move. I might have eaten or I might not have, but I do know I didn't get up the next day until close to noon. So 2 days max. I'm perfectly fine with not seeing those shadowy figures again. Story 7. I have been going to sleep by 9:30 p.m. for the last 3 days. I haven't gone to sleep before midnight, averaging 1 to 2 a.m. in the past year. If I abandon my routine of an evening walk, shower, face and mouth care, magnesium, spearmint tea, and low-volume meditation sleep guide, I could potentially earn $40,000. 3 days of consistently getting almost 8 hours of sleep feels like $3 million to me. Story 8. I'm a former meth user, and my record is 50 hours awake, which was extremely difficult. I can't begin to explain how much more extreme hours 42 to 48 are compared to hours 1 to 42. You are not supposed to be awake for more than 18 hours. Honestly, 24 hours is doable for most, but it is challenging, and 48 hours is seriously unhealthy and miserable. So, I would take 24 hours and $10,000. Story 9. I would fail this instantly. I can't stay awake for a full 24 hours. I would end up getting less than half an hour of sleep, at least if I tried to do this. There is no money for me. Story 10. Just give me a deadline, and I can complete it in 3 days without a problem. The 4th day might be a bit shaky. I wouldn't rely on myself to drive either. Story 11. I am diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1 with psychotic features, so I would sometimes stop taking my medication. It is surprising how long I can go without sleep. This can be very dangerous. Story 12. For the first 2 days, avoid all stimulants. Focus on consuming apples, water, and engaging in various activities. Keep the room cold. After 48 hours, if I am struggling significantly, that is when I would consider using methamphetamine. I could probably last another 3 to 4 days. I once stayed awake for 48 hours working on post-production for a television show finale that was filmed one day and aired the next night. I went straight from the editing suite to the viewing party, followed by the wrap party. At 4 a.m., I realized I was alone in a pub, crying into a beer. I returned to my hotel room and slept until midday, then boarded my flight home. It served as good training for this. Story 13. 10,000 is easy. 20,000 is extremely difficult, but possible. 30,000 is impossible for most people. The most I have ever worked is 38 hours pushing for deadlines. I could possibly extend it to 48 with the motivation of 10,000. I could always be strategic and include a variety of adrenaline activities in the final sprint. Story 14. I'm going to make $20,000, and that's it. No special preparation is needed, but I'm not staying awake for more than 48 hours. Story 15. No one is asking the real question here. Is there a limit on the amount of cocaine I can use? Because if not, things are about to get strange, and I'm about to be very rich. Story 16. I've done over 70 hours awake a few times in my life, and I agree with many that $30,000 is far from worth it. $20,000 is reasonable if I can choose anything I want to do during that time. Story 17. I would stay up all night, take my $10,000, and then go to sleep. That amount of money is not worth it, considering there are recorded instances of people dying within 72 hours of not sleeping. Story 18. I would do a day. That's an easy 10,000. I don't think I would make it 2 days, and I have never tried it. I am not sure I want to find out what would happen if I attempted it. Story 19. A day at most. People who say 3 days are crazy and probably have never tried. I was awake for 36 hours once, after a good night's rest and caffeine during that time, and it was dreadful. I felt like I was getting punched in the brain, and that's when I realized I needed to actually sleep. I can imagine anything over 30 hours is very hard without drugs. This is coming from someone who has pulled 24 hours plenty of times, both in my younger years and now. Story 20. One day, please. I might be able to do more, but it would be a struggle. Staying awake for 24 hours to earn 3 months' pay? That's good enough for me. Story 21. 3 days is a bit extreme and more likely unhealthy. I have completed many 48-hour durations in my life, so I would just take my 20,000 steps with some coffee and some reading or ambient music. Story 22. I had a similar scenario happen to me, but with a different pay rate. I ended up working 52 hours and earned $3.4 million. I was hallucinating by the end of it. I am certain I could not have gone longer. I hit a wall and just shut down. Story 23. 2 days is the maximum for me. After that, I not only cannot stay awake, but the damage it would cause to my brain is not worth it. Story 24. I would probably take some MDMA. Caffeine doesn't work on me. Most of the time, it makes me sleepier. Story 25. When I was younger, in the 1980s, I used to sleep 6 nights a week, with Saturday nights reserved for weekend-long Dungeons and Dragons games. Yes, I admit it, but I'm getting to a point. My gaming group in Nottingham noticed that the world record for the longest Dungeons and Dragons session was 100 hours, and we believed we could beat it. The local community center manager offered us a room and agreed to organize the record details if we did a practice run. We completed 120 hours without sleep, which was insane, but we were confident we could break the record. I slept for 18 hours afterward, was pretty useless for the next 6 hours, and then slept again. Unfortunately, the community center manager passed away in a freak swimming accident, and we lost the motivation to pursue the record. Story 26. Considering I once stayed awake for 4 days straight, I would say $40,000 would be the maximum, but that was when I was a teenager. Nowadays, 2 days would be my limit. Story 27. I did this while at university for free as an experiment. We went through 3 nights, and by the afternoon of the 4th day, it felt like I was drunk. I couldn't get my key in the door, and we were taking short naps that entire last day. By the way, I lasted the longest of the 4 of us who started. I guarantee I wouldn't have lasted another night. So 30 to 40,000 is the maximum a normal person can manage. Perhaps a day or so more if you have trained. Story 28. A computer is placed in a bright, empty room. There is no bed. An annoying alarm needs to be reset every 5 to 10 minutes. There is an endless supply of energy drinks. Story 29. With the power of Adderall, I accidentally stayed awake for about 40 hours without feeling tired. I eventually decided to go to bed. I would say that with medication, coffee, and stimulating activities, staying awake for 3 days or more is certainly possible. Story 30. When I was in high school, Fallout 4 was released, and I would stay up for about 2 to 3 days from Friday morning to Sunday afternoon or evening, which is approximately 55 to 60 hours straight every weekend for about 2 months. I played it every moment except when I went out to get energy drinks, with Mother Revive being my drink of choice. I don't know how I did it. I doubt I have it in me to do that now, but I know I can manage 36 hours. If I absolutely push myself, I could do 48 hours and potentially earn $20,000. Unfortunately, Mother no longer makes the Revive flavor, at least not here in Australia, so my drink of choice is a toss-up between Monster Mango Loco or Blue V. I'd also be relying on Vivance quite a bit. Story 31. I have completed 2 to 3 day stretches before and could likely do that again. Once in my life, I stayed awake for 5 days due to insomnia and school, without any drug abuse or extenuating circumstances. Realistically, I could aim for $30,000, but I would be satisfied with $10,000. Story 32. I try to take the 30,000. Anything above that is madness and can lead to financial ruin. Not enough money. If it were to double every day, 10, 20, 40, 80, 160, 320, 640, it would be a different story. Story 33. I would recommend preparing by adjusting your sleep pattern beforehand. Keep meals light and avoid heavy substances for the final 48 hours. Staying awake for 48 hours can be manageable. Story 34. As someone who worked 48-hour shifts, I can earn $20,000 easily. There is no reason to work 72 hours, although some individuals may manage to make $30,000 or $40,000. Story 35. You are likely to die after about 4 to 5 days. If the exhaustion doesn't put you in a coma first, the paranoia and hallucinations may cause you to run in front of a bus. Story 36. For real, I would take the $10,000 and do 24 hours. Something I do sometimes anyway. So this question is more like, hey, would you like a free $10,000? Story 37. I've never tried meth, but for $10,000 a day, I heard people can go entire weeks without sleeping. Story 38. Do I receive the money each day or cumulatively at the end? I can manage one day on my own easily and often do, and then 10,000 can buy plenty of stimulants. Story 39. I have managed to stay awake for 38 hours before, so if I receive anything for a half day, then I am getting £15,000. Hopefully. Story 40. Former military and current firefighter and paramedic. I was made for this challenge. I am about to be rich. Story 41. Child's play. Stop taking my medication. I can reach the maximum a human can endure without bodily or mental harm. Story 42. To make this worth it, you need to add a 0 after each day. The first day is 10,000, the second day is 100,000, the third day is 1 million, and so on. Story 43. I would be exhausted by the end of it, but I have done it before due to poor work shift scheduling, and $30,000 is a good amount of money. Story 44. I think I would do 2 and walk away with 20. Stand, walk, hike, and so on. Be miserable with coffee and similar drinks. $20,000 is a lot, but there is no way to make life-changing money with this challenge, so my goal would be to take a decent jackpot and move on. $20,000 could cover a year of rent in a small apartment in my area or serve as a down payment for a small place in a more affordable area if I wanted to set it aside. This is definitely not insignificant, but I feel you would hit diminishing returns on what this money will achieve while experiencing increasingly difficult times as you stay awake longer. Story 45. I participated in 3 days when I was much younger, and it was not a pleasant experience. So, I guess 10 kilometers is fine. Thank you. Story 46. I can realistically make about $30,000 to $50,000. At my current age, after about 36 hours, I will need some serious encouragement and physical activities to keep me going and awake. However, yes, 3 to 5 days is manageable. I would have been able to do it easily without assistance when I was a teenager or in my early 20s because I did it then. Story 47. I have experienced staying awake for a day and a night multiple times due to work issues. Earning $20,000 is sufficient for me, but going without sleep is detrimental to health. It's not worth it to extend those periods. If I had time and resources to prepare, I would spend 1 or 2 months living in a cave. A researcher named Sifri conducted studies on circadian rhythms, showing that people can often deviate from 24-hour cycles and adapt to 48-hour cycles with enough time. Story 48. I would spend the first day and then use the money to buy a large quantity of stimulants, which should keep me awake for a few months. Story 49. All the current and former emergency medical services, fire department, police, or military members laughing at how wealthy we would become from doing this. Story 50. It would probably take up one full day. I might reach the second day if I could find something that can really capture my attention and keep me awake, but I doubt it. 10,000 would already be nice. More than that, honestly, it's not worth it if I consider the downsides. Story 51. I have pulled an all-nighter in high school before. It's not that bad. I felt surprisingly awake the next day despite not sleeping. It would be rather simple to load up on caffeine and video games for a second all-nighter. As long as you keep your brain active, you won't fall asleep. You can pay someone on Fiverr a couple of dollars to keep talking to you or to play games with you to help you stay awake. Story 52. I have gone 3 nights without sleep for free many times while working as a salaried employee, driving a plow truck for a municipality. A salary of $40,000 would be realistic for me. Story 53. I will be doing 24 hours and happily walking with $10,000. I would get a suite at a ball game and invite all my friends. I know I can't do 48, so I'm not even going to try. Story 54. Quit using drugs many years ago. I would be willing to go for plenty of packages. Story 55. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so it's about maximizing the things that keep my brain engaged. I embrace the stimulation. I boot up Civilization and Crusader Kings on different devices and alternate periodically. Occasionally, I switch to Fortnite for constant stimulation, taking one more turn. I consume energy drinks, which is self-explanatory. I join an active group chat with all notifications turned on. I have to check every notification or my anxiety increases. I pay a friend to take the night shifts while I sleep during the day. They walk around the house with heavy footfalls and open and close doors. This triggers my childhood trauma and makes it so I can never feel sleepy. I believe I can manage close to a week. Story 56. Meth is not popular in my country, but cocaine is. Maybe I will try one day sober and then use some cocaine to see where that takes me. However, $30,000 is more than enough. Story 57. I had issues with sleeping as a teenager and once went 7 days without sleep. The hallucinations were horrifying. I remember begging my parents to take me to the hospital. Days felt like years. Nights were the worst. I personally wouldn't go over 3 days for anything less than $100,000 a day. Mind you, I didn't have a choice because my body wouldn't let me sleep. Still, I would never relive that period of my life. I regularly went 2 to 5 days without sleep for years. Story 58. I could last 3 days. Then I'd seriously reconsider this. It is not worth the long-lasting issues where the expenses will eventually outweigh the extra 10,000. Then, I stock up on energy drinks and sugary sweets. Next, I set all my electronics to blue light mode, which actively keeps your mind awake, unlike red light mode. Lastly, I remove my bed and any comfortable seating from my apartment. That way, my body has no chance of finding a comfortable spot to sleep. I would say I could go 3 to 4 days before passing out. Story 60. I could probably work 1 or 2 full days to earn $20,000. I stayed awake for about 24 hours when my mother had oral surgery because her bleeding wouldn't stop until morning when the dentist reopened. That was without any real planning. If I can get the right food and energy drinks or coffee, I think I can reasonably handle 2 full days. Story 61. I managed to go 3 days without trouble when I was 13. These days, I could stay up for 48 hours before struggling. I would not push past 3 days no matter what because of the health risks involved. Story 62. Great question. I suggest watching a video about a study conducted on a few individuals who were provided with all the facilities, including food and entertainment, but were not allowed to sleep. Story 63. At most 20,000, probably 10,000. The few times I've been awake for more than 24 hours at a time, I would have given up 10,000 without hesitation if it meant getting some sleep. Story 64. As the local narcoleptic, I can only manage 1 day, and only if I'm in fight or flight mode the entire time. Even then, the microsleeps will probably disqualify me. Story 65. Staying awake is extremely dangerous. I would do it for a couple of days and then take a long nap. My record is 4 days with 3 sick children to care for. I was a zombie by the end of it. Story 66. I have been awake for 7 days after surgery due to breathing issues. It was difficult. In this instance, I played video games and watched videos online. I think I could do it again for $70,000. Story 67. 3 days of meth. I would prefer it to be under doctor supervision, though. I do not want to do anything crazy while sleep deprived. Story 68. Time to renew the ADHD medication prescription. I only have 4 days left based on previous experience. Story 69. 70,000 for sure. I don't sleep much and use speed as medication. A whole week is something I've done many times before. Story 70. Be like that person who drank an entire large beverage full of energy drink. Story 71. I could probably do 3 hours. I would need my computer, a TV, and if possible, a treadmill, but I could do without it. I would play Marvel Rivals as it always keeps me engaged, and then I would watch TV while on the treadmill. The only issue would be fighting boredom. My girlfriend would be lucky to last beyond 12 hours. Story 72. I would be okay with 30,000. Maybe I would try to push it a bit further to 40,000, 50,000 at most. If I wanted to end my life, there are more peaceful ways to do so. I would rather deal with brain damage from alcohol. Story 73. I would drink 2 Monster Mocha Java drinks. I would stay awake for 3 straight days without my eyelids drooping. Story 74. I basically do this now. Some nights I only get 2 hours of sleep. I might as well stay awake for the extra 2 hours and get paid. Story 75. A radio personality did this in the 1950s and stayed awake for a whole week. It completely affected his mental state, and he was never the same afterward. If you were to attempt it, 3 days is probably the maximum. Story 76. $10,000. I experienced sleep deprivation in the military. Food is something you can manage without, but sleep is essential. Story 77. I would stay awake for 24 hours every few days and collect my recurring $10,000 since it doesn't specify that these days need to be consecutive. Story 78. Like most people said, 2 days. I would work 2 days every other week and earn $40,000 a month, $480,000 a year minus tax, and consider it my job for life. Story 79. I went nearly 3 days without sleep in college once, and I needed performance-enhancing drugs for that. I don't think I could stay awake for 24 hours at this point, no matter how I prepared. I feel like I want to nap every 4 or 5 hours I've been awake. Story 80. I don't play anymore, but Minecraft can keep me awake indefinitely. Just Minecraft for 3 days, collect my 30,000, then check myself into the hospital, probably. Story 81. I heard the story of a man who tried to stay awake for as long as possible, and it negatively affected his mind. Story 82. My first thought was to use meth for 3 days, but the consequences would likely include losing my job and becoming dependent on substances again. Perhaps I should just see how long I can last with energy drinks. I pull all-nighters every few months, and by the end of the second day, I'll be dozing off. Story 83. I stayed up for 3 days once. When I walked, it felt like with each step I was falling from a great height. Story 84. I would get a good night's sleep after some time, and I could probably earn a $30,000 payday. As long as I could just play video games the entire time. Story 85. I could earn about 100,000. I have managed a 10-day streak once before, and I am confident that with the right resources, I could do it again. Story 86. As a freshman in college, I stayed awake for 7 days straight. At one point, I stood up to walk somewhere, but I don't remember where. I passed out while walking and woke up on the floor 3 days later. I had a roommate at the time, and they didn't seem to think it was a problem. I should also note I wasn't drinking alcohol or using drugs. I was primarily just playing video games the whole time. My system apparently shut down completely from sleep deprivation. Story 87. If I were being pedantic, I would live my normal life and get 8 hours of sleep every night. Your post does not specify that it must be done in one go or within a certain time frame, just as long as possible. If I sleep for 8 hours, that leaves me with 16 hours of daytime or time awake. After a week, I would have 112 hours of awake time, which is equivalent to 4.6 days. This guarantees earning $40,000 a week simply by sleeping for 8 hours. Story 88. I recently stayed awake for 49 hours straight. It was not enjoyable and I did not like it, but for $20,000 I would do it again. Story 89. I work for 24 hours on a somewhat regular basis. I have gone as long as 76 hours and could not function anymore. If I can work 10,000 hours in 24 days, I will do 48 and walk away happy. Story 90. I have worked 3 nights on several occasions. I prefer it to be easy, but as long as there is something happening or something fun to do, I would earn my 30,000. Story 91. Sleep for a week, prepare a lot of coffee and sugar, and it's finally time to watch my list. Story 92. I don't think I would be able to make it past 2 days. When I get tired, I struggle to keep my eyes open. I suppose I could try to maintain my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder medication dosage continuously throughout the day and night, but I can't imagine that's very healthy. If it worked, I don't think I would go past 4 days. This is assuming I wouldn't have to drive or go to work because I work in a pharmacy and I'm not going to risk messing with people's prescriptions. I guess I would just call off work for those 4 days. Story 93. So far, my personal record for staying awake is 36 hours, which usually occurred during college when I had many assignments due at the same time. I believe I could potentially extend that to 48 hours if absolutely necessary, but that would be the limit, as it typically takes me a week to recover from being awake for 36 hours. I would need a lot of caffeine and engaging activities like video games or a research topic to make it happen. Story 94. I have never stayed awake for an entire day without sleep. Not as a teenager, not as a college student, and not as the mother of a newborn. My body simply does not function that way, and my mind has never desired to. Perhaps I could earn $10,000, but I am certain that anything beyond that would just leave me crying or feeling ill, making it not worth the effort. Story 95. In my younger days, I had several occasions where I had to stay awake for over 3 days straight. Unfortunately, now that I'm older, I would have to limit it to 2 days or I would probably be risking a cardiac event. I would prepare by sleeping in, drinking coffee, and playing adrenaline-focused video games. I could probably manage 2 days for a payment of $20,000. Story 96. 2 nights and 3 days awake is the most I can do without too many issues. I managed to do it a couple of times in college and would definitely consider it for $30,000. I just need plenty of caffeine and to take a jog now and then. Story 97. I drove across the country once in 3 days with just energy drinks, but I didn't feel so good afterward, so I'd say 3 or 4. Story 98. I stayed awake for 56 hours once, and it took me about 4 months to feel rested again after sleeping. I will do the 48 and tap out. Story 99. My friend and I heard that if you stay awake for 14 days you could die, so we decided to test that. I managed to stay awake for 6 days with some chemical assistance before I gave out. On the way home, I'm pretty sure I got into a fight with some bushes. By the way, where can I pick up the money? Story 100. In my 20s in the military, I had several stints over 72 hours and would never want to attempt the same again. Every time I would start hallucinating after 48 hours, and that was just terrifying. Story 101. My brain has been through a lot. I could probably manage 4 days with some caffeine and stimulants, perhaps something sharp to motivate myself, and buckets of ice water. Story 102. I would stop taking my prescription sleep medications. I once made a mistake and didn't get them refilled in time. 3 days would be more than manageable, but it would be difficult. Story 103. A bag of rolling tobacco and a bag of filters would last me 2 days. Anything more than that is not worth the cost and the health risks. Story 104. I often fly across many time zones, and there is no way I would get any money to stay awake. It is one of the most miserable experiences ever. Story 105. I'm good for $140,000. After 7 days, I can sleep with my eyes open and still hear what is going on. Story 106. I have extreme persistent insomnia and have stayed awake for 4 days straight against my will. If I stop taking all the medications I am on to help me sleep and consume a little caffeine, I think I could easily manage 5 days. Story 107. Find a job that pays you more than $30,000 a month and get your rest. That's not nearly enough money for me to do that. Perhaps for $100,000 a day. Story 108. As someone who has worked 60 hours straight, I can say that nothing worth saying takes longer than 18 hours. After 24 hours, you start hearing and seeing things that you know are not real, but after 36 hours, you don't know anymore what is real and what is not. At 48 hours, you become like a zombie, just moving. For me, after that, everything disappears. When you try to sleep after something like that, it takes a few hours to get your brain to stop. Story 109. Preparation would simply involve obtaining methamphetamine. Additionally, I might acquire some benzodiazepines or barbiturates for when I want to sleep. It's easy to make $70,000. Story 110. As someone who has breached the 72-hour mark once through stimulants, such as Adderall and energy drinks, during college, I cannot recommend it less. Story 111. This might be the only situation in which I would be an entertaining reality show participant. I become delirious very quickly when I am sleep-deprived, just fully slap-happy and uncensored. At the same time, it becomes really difficult for me to fall asleep. I actually think $10,000 per day would be a bargain for how entertaining this would likely be to watch. Story 112. If drugs are allowed, I know what I am doing. I could manage for at least 2 weeks. However, I would risk experiencing psychosis. Story 113. I have insomnia and have been taking medication to help me sleep since I was 16. As it is genetic, I can go for 3 days without any issues, but after that, I start to hallucinate, so 3 days is my maximum. Story 114. As someone in recovery, I will not address how I would prepare, but I am confident I would earn at least $50,000. Story 115. I stayed awake for 3 days while I was still in high school playing World of Warcraft, and I heard people talking to me who weren't there. I could reach the 3-day mark again. Story 116. 24 hours for 10 kilometers. I'm starting to feel a bit too old for anything longer than that. However, the 10 kilometers would be more than enough to help me move forward with my life. Story 117. I believe I could manage 1 day easily, and 2 days would be quite challenging, but I truly think I could handle 3 days if $30,000 is at stake. That would likely be my limit, though. Story 118. I could easily manage 3 days, after which I would lie down and see how much longer I could stay awake, just out of curiosity. Story 119. Maybe I would do it 1 day. There would be no preparation other than getting a good night's sleep before staying awake for 24 hours. It would be absolute insanity to do anything more than 2 to 3 days. Story 120. I consider it $10,000 I didn't have. I genuinely don't think there is anything worse than the feeling of being exhausted and not being able to sleep. I wouldn't even try to stay awake for 48 hours because once the hallucinations start, it's truly hell. Story 121. One all-nighter would be the best I can do. I will invest straight into it. Having suffered from sleep deprivation, $10,000 isn't worth it. Story 122. If you asked my younger self, I would have done it for 4 days for free. I think the longest I managed was 5 days. If you asked my adult self now, I would say maybe 2 days and it would be a struggle. Story 123. My record is 9 days, but that was with a lot of assistance. If I could have support to earn money, then great, but if not, I will barely make it to day 2. Story 124. I have completed 5 days without drugs, just challenging myself to see how long I could last. Now, with some energy drinks and medication, I believe 6 or 7 days would be easy. Story 125. I would stockpile caffeine, naps, and mindset techniques. My limit is probably 3 days before I become exhausted. My maximum limit is $30,000 before I cash out. Story 126. Even after just 24 hours of no sleep, you will be in a mental state similar to 3 times the legal blood alcohol limit. After 48 hours, hallucinations may begin. There is nothing you can do to prepare. The mind needs sleep. Story 127. I remember some years ago during the early 2000s, there was a television show in the UK called Shattered, where contestants had to stay awake for about a week to win money. There were some cruel challenges designed to make people fall asleep. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.